Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for a special early daily dose of March of the Machine spoilers. So spoiler season kicks off officially on Wednesday, and we will have coverage of all of it. We even got a full Commander Precon to show off for all of y'all the following week, but Wizards gave us a couple of Planeswalker cards early, a new Elspeth, a new Wrenn. So today we're going to break them down. I apologize, my voice sounds really bad. I've been pretty sick lately, but these cards are so sweet. We just gotta talk about them. So we better jump right into it. Start talking about our sweet new Planeswalkers from March of the Machines. Before we do, a couple quick reminders. Number one, to keep up on all the latest spoilers throughout spoiler season, make sure to head on over to MTGPreviews.com. And number two, if you need any of these cards, you can snag them from our awesome sponsor, Card Kingdom, over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Anyway, let's talk about new Elspeth and new Wrenn from March of the Machines. So first up, we got a new Elspeth in Archangel Elspeth. So Archangel Elspeth, 4 mana, 4 loyalty, +1, you make a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink, -2, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. The creature becomes an angel in addition to its other types, and it gains flying forever, which is kind of unique. There's no flying counter or anything, just permanently gives the creature flying. And then -6, return all non-land permanents, mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So Archangel Elspeth, it's a card we really got to look at in two lights, flavor and then also gameplay. Flavor wise, I absolutely love this card. It really brings Elspeth's story back to where it began. Like, this bookends the entire saga of Elspeth. If you look at the first ever Elspeth, Elspeth Knight Errant, printed 15 years ago, Archangel Elspeth is shockingly similar. The pluses on both make 1/1s. The second ability on both of them, I guess the big difference is Archangel Elspeth is a -2, while Elspeth Knight Errant is a +1, but they both send a creature to the air and give them a boost. And then the ultimate on each of them kind of protects your stuff in a weird way. Elspeth Knight Errant just does it directly by making your stuff indestructible, while Archangel Elspeth returns all your cheap stuff from the graveyard to the battlefield. So I absolutely love that we've followed Elspeth's story for 15 years through these ups and downs and all these different planes, and we kind of end up right back where we started. So flavor wise, I think this card is an absolute home run. As far as how powerful this card is, that's kind of a different story. Traditionally, planeswalkers that plus to make a token are really good because you can plus and add loyalty while also making a blocker to defend the planeswalker, but I think that might be changing. I was really high on Jaya Fiery Negotiator when it came out a few months ago, mostly because of that plus to make a token, but also having a bunch of other relevant abilities, and Jaya has absolutely flopped. Like, I haven't seen Jaya hardly at all in Standard, so I think that just plussing to make a 1/1 probably isn't enough anymore. So that makes me a little bit skeptical of Archangel Elspeth. The -2 is nice. You're essentially getting a 1 with the wind, except it's not an aura, so it can't be blown up. I could imagine there being a deck where you want to, like, turn 3 play Adeline, turn 4 Archangel Elspeth, -2 on Adeline, send it to the air, just kill your opponent really, really quickly. We saw like 3 mana Ajani do some of these shenanigans, and obviously 4 mana is a lot more than 3 mana, but I could definitely see Archangel Elspeth serving a role because of that -2, and really you can do it twice, which is nice. So you can do this 2 turns in a row. So maybe this could be a top end in some sort of aggro deck where you're mostly playing it just to, like, smash your biggest threat into your opponent's face by sending it to the air. I've seen some people talk about the angel mode of this card, turning a creature into an angel. I think that's a trap. I saw people mentioning, like, I'm going to play this in Angel Tribal. And if you want to play an Angel Tribal in Commander for flavor or whatever, absolutely go for it, because the flavor is really sweet. But if you think about, like, Selesnya Angels and Pioneer or something, all your creatures are already angels, so there's not really a point in playing a card to try to turn your creatures into angels because they're already angels anyway. That said, there is some jank combo potential with, like, Book of Exalted Deeds. Imagine, like, turning a Slippery Boggle into an angel with Archangel Elspeth, and then using Book to turn Slippery Boggle into, like, this pseudo platinum angel so you can never die since it has hexproof. Obviously not going to be a top tier thing or whatever, but it would be a fun thing to try to pull off. The ultimate, I think, is very powerful, although I don't think you really can build around around the ultimate. Maybe in standard you can, since we have proliferate. Coming in with 4 loyalty, ultimating at 6 loyalty means 1 turn of plussing and 1 proliferate can get you to the ultimate. So maybe there's a deck that could actually build around it just because of proliferate in standard, but it's essentially a mass Sun Titan for everything except lands. But if you're playing a deck with a bunch of cheap things, this could essentially win you the game. Like getting back 3, 4, 5, 10 things from the graveyard is probably going to be enough that your opponent's not going to be able to come back for there. So I think that Archangel Elspeth, I don't think it's as bad as people think. I also don't think it's an all-star. Like, I could imagine soldiers maybe playing it on the top end of their curve to send a big threat to the air. Although at the same time, soldiers, do they need it? Like, you already have Thalia, so that's going to be taxing your Archangel Elspeth. Maybe it's a sideboard card. My biggest concern for standard is honestly the existence of the Wandering Emperor. And Wandering Emperor has just shown itself to be an all-star planeswalker. As he's played all the way back to modern, it's just a very, very strong card. So it's difficult for me to imagine Archangel Elspeth in essentially any standard deck beating out the Wandering Emperor. But the thing is, Wandering Emperor is going to rotate in a few months. Like, it's going to be gone at rotation. So maybe Elspeth will get her chance to shine once Wandering Emperor is out of the format. So Archangel Elspeth, I like the card. I love the flavor of it. I love how it calls back to the first ever Elspeth and just really bookends the whole storyline of Elspeth. As far as gameplay, I think it's kind of like probably a C tier planeswalker, maybe a C plus. I think there could be decks that could use it, maybe out of the sideboard, although I would not be at all surprised if it struggles to find a home until Wandering Emperor rotates out of standard. Planeswalker number 2, we have another Wrenn and Realmbreaker. So new Wrenn, 3 mana, 4 loyalty, static ability, lands you control have tap to add a mana of any color, +1 up to 1 target land you control becomes a 3/3 elemental creature with vigilance, hexproof, and haste until your next turn. It's still a land. A couple of notes there. First, it doesn't untap the land, which is super duper relevant. And second, the land stays a creature until your next turn. So you do have it on defense. -2, mill 3 cards. You can put a permanent card from among the milled cards into your hand. And then -7, you get an emblem with you can play land cards and cast permanent spells from your graveyard. The emblem, obviously super game-endingly powerful. That's so much graveyard value. So this is our 3rd Wrenn. We had Wrenn and 6, Wrenn and 7, and now I guess Wrenn and Realmbreaker is Wrenn and 8 technically. I think that Wrenn and Realmbreaker is a pretty powerful standard planeswalker. If you think about what this does, its static ability is Chromatic Lantern essentially. Obviously it doesn't add any mana because Wrenn doesn't untap a land, it's not generating mana, but still if you're playing some sort of 5-color deck, having all your lands tap for every color is going to make your mana really easy, kind of a cheat code to make your mana work. The +1, it kind of looks like Nissa Who Shakes the World, which is an absolutely busted card, but really it's kind of more like Nissa Worldwaker in the sense that it doesn't untap the land, which is honestly a really huge deal for this card. So if you really think of how this is going to play in a game of Magic, if you run this out on turn 3, Wrenn really doesn't protect itself at all. You can +1 to turn a land into a creature, but that creature is going to be tapped, so even though it has vigilance and hexproof and haste and all this stuff, it's not going to do anything. You can -2 it to get something back that you mill, although then you're going to have a Wrenn with just 2 loyalty, so it's probably going to die to a whatever Blood Tithe Harvester or something. So I think the fact that the land doesn't untap is a big concern. I think this is actually kind of a 4 mana planeswalker a lot of the time. If you play this when you have 4 mana available, then you can play it and use your untap land to defend Wrenn and Realmbreaker. So I think a lot of times you're going to want to wait that 1 extra turn to actually run this card out. So while not being able to untap a land definitely keeps its power down, it's probably a good thing, because if it did actually untap a land, I think this card would be like incredibly busted. It would certainly be an all-star in like mono green devotion in formats like Pioneer, untapping Nykthos. Like, it would be miserable. It'd be like a mini Teferi Hero of Dominaria, where you could play this, untap, leave up Spell Pierce, leave up Fatal Push, leave up Lightning Bolt to defend your Wrenn, and have this 3/3 hexproof, really hard to kill land. So I think that Wrenn and Realmbreaker, yes, the fact that it doesn't untap the land means it's not busted. If it did untap the land, this would be in the conversation for like top 10 planeswalkers, top 20 planeswalkers. It would be a really good card. As it is, I think it's still a fine card. It's not quite as good as people maybe think. The -2 mode, it's kind of like a mini Wasteful Harvest, I guess. The most notable aspect is you only can return a permanent card from the cards that you milled. So among those 3 cards, compare that to like Tyver Jubilant Brawler. Tyver, you mill 3 cards, but then you return any creature mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Wrenn and Realmbreaker, you mill 3 cards. If you got something else in your graveyard that you really want to get back, you can't do that. You can only get it from the 3 cards you milled. That doesn't make Wrenn and Realmbreaker bad by any sense. Like, if you're playing this in a deck with lands and a bunch of creatures and other permanents, you're not going to whiff with it very often. In worst case, you're just getting a random land back, but its ability to find this specific card you want is going to be kind of minimal just because you're only really seeing those 3 cards. The ultimate, obviously absurd. It's essentially a Madroltha, but without Madrolthas, only one of each permanent type restriction. Like, if you ultimate this and are not immediately dead on the backswing, it is going to take over the game. Assuming your graveyard is active, it is soft to graveyard 8, kind of like a Conduit of Worlds as well without the restriction. So I think Wrenn and Realmbreaker, it is a card that has a lot of power, even though it doesn't untap that land. If you think about Standard, it'll probably be at its best in a deck that actively cares about filling the graveyard. Like, I think that's probably the main home. Every spoiler season, we talk about the potential of some sort of like Golgari or Sultai graveyard deck with old stick fingers and Urborg Lurgoyf. Wrenn and Realmbreaker seems perfect there. You're already going to be playing a ton of creatures. This is filling your graveyard. It's fixing your mana if you need it to. You're getting back your Urborg Lurgoyfs or old stick fingers or whatever. Like, it seems really solid there. The other sneaky place to play this is in some of the like 5-color Atraxa decks. Like, trying to reanimate Atraxa is a pretty popular strategy in Standard. And some of these decks are essentially full-on 5-color decks with Cami Wars, and you're using Cruelty of Gix. Wrenn and Realmbreaker seems sneaky good there. It's filling your graveyard with the -2, and then it's also just fixing your mana. So if you need to hard cast your Atraxa, hard cast your Cami War or whatever, Wrenn and Realmbreaker is going to let you get that done. In older formats, one of the things I like about it is it does come down on turn 2 off of a mana dork. We see in Pioneer tons of Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystics, Birds of Paradise, and Noble Hierarchs in Modern. So there's a lot of decks that can play this on turn 2. That said, just coming down on turn 2 isn't necessarily enough to make a green planeswalker good. Here are all of the legal green planeswalkers that cost 3 mana. If you actually look at these cards, Kiora is an all-star, but that's really just in green devotion decks and Pioneer because it untaps Nykthos. Grist and Tyver both see pretty heavy play. And then the other 4, Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, Vivian, both Domrays, they really don't see any play at all. So just coming down on turn 2 off a mana dork is not enough to guarantee a card's success in a format like Pioneer or Modern. Could there be a deck that would want this? I think the answer is yes. Again, if you care about filling your graveyard, this seems like a pretty reasonable value card that you can play, especially if you can get some extra value out of the mana fixing. But I don't think it just coming down off of a Llanowar Elves on turn 2 means this is a Modern all-star or whatever. The other thing I wanted to mention for Commander is I think people are going to really overplay this card. People love Chromatic Lantern in Commander, and this is really a bad Chromatic Lantern. It's a Chromatic Lantern that doesn't do the most important thing Chromatic Lantern does, which is ramp you. Wrenn and Realmbreaker, it does fix your mana, but it's not adding extra mana, and it also is susceptible to getting attacked, unlike Chromatic Lantern. So I think people will jam this in random Commander decks on the justification of it's going to fix my mana, but I don't actually think that's a very good justification. I have found that unless you're playing on a budget, Chromatic Lantern isn't super necessary. Like, I guess it's a nice easy mode thing. You don't have to think about your mana if you have Chromatic Lantern because every land is tapping for every color. But if you have a reasonable mana base, your mana should be just as functional even without it. So I think this will probably be a little bit overplayed in Commander, similar to how Chromatic Lantern is, just because people really value the like ultra fixing aspect, even though I think that ability is a little overrated. So Wrenn and Realmbreaker, when I first saw it, I thought this was going to be like a super pushed, over-the-top, really busted 3-mana planeswalker, but I kind of overlooked that it doesn't untap the land, so now I think it's just a solid 3-mana planeswalker that has a chance to see Standard play in graveyard decks, maybe even like Modern or Pioneer play in graveyard decks, but I do think it's a little bit more of like an archetype staple than something that you're just going to jam in any deck possible. You got to have a lot of permanence, you got to care about using your graveyard, and remember, a lot of times Wrenn and Realmbreaker is going to be better as a 4-mana planeswalker, even though it costs 3 mana, just so you can use that +1 to protect it with a hexproof land right away. So anyway, those are our 2 early planeswalkers from March of the Machines. Spoiler season, kicking back off on Wednesday, and we will cover all of it. We even got a whole Commander deck to show off for you next week, so keep an eye out for all that. In the meantime, let me know what you think. What planeswalker are you more excited about? Where can Wrenn and Realmbreaker show up? Where can Elspeth show up? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, everyone. And again, sorry for the super crunchy voice. I'm still pretty sick, but these cards are so sweet. We just had to talk about them. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon.